The first time Charlotte Anderson saw him across the dog park, she didn't think much of it. Just another dog owner with a gorgeous chocolate Labrador who seemed more interested in his phone than the sunny Saturday morning. But that was before Baxter, her overenthusiastic golden retriever, decided to introduce himself by stealing the lab's tennis ball and dropping it directly at the man's feet. "I'm so sorry," Charlotte called, jogging over with her cheeks flushed from embarrassment. "Baxter thinks every ball in the park belongs to him." When the man looked up, Charlotte's apology caught in her throat. His eyes were a striking blue that contrasted with his dark hair, and the smile that spread across his face transformed him from merely handsome to breathtaking. "No harm done," he replied, picking up the slobbery ball with bare hands, a true dog person's move. "I'm pretty sure Rex here was about to abandon it anyway." He tossed the ball back across the park, sending both dogs racing after it. "I'm Kevin, by the way, Kevin Harrison." "Charlotte Anderson," she replied, tucking a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "And the ball thief is Baxter. Nice to meet you both." Kevin glanced at his watch. "I've got to run to a meeting, but I'm sure Rex and I will see you around." Charlotte nodded and watched as he called his dog, clipped on the leash, and walked toward the park exit. There was something about his confident stride and the way he moved with purpose that caught her attention. But Charlotte didn't give it much thought as she turned back to Baxter, who was now splashing in the small pond at the center of the park. Little did she know that this brief encounter would be the first of many. The following weekend, Charlotte was surprised to see Kevin sitting on a bench near the dog run. His chocolate lab was playing with a border collie, while Kevin seemed to be enjoying the morning sun. "Morning," she called out, unleashing Baxter, who immediately bounded toward the other dogs. Kevin looked up, recognition lighting his face. "Charlotte, right? And the notorious ball thief," she laughed, appreciating that he remembered. "That's us. I see Rex is making friends." "More friends than I usually make on a Saturday morning," Kevin replied with a self-deprecating smile, patting the space next to him on the bench. Charlotte hesitated briefly before sitting down. There was something about Kevin that made her curious. He dressed simply in jeans and a button-down shirt, but the watch on his wrist looked expensive, and his shoes weren't the kind you'd find at a department store. "So what do you do, Charlotte?" Kevin asked, his eyes following the dogs. "I'm a veterinary nurse," she answered. "I work at Parkside Animal Hospital just a few blocks from here." "That explains why Baxter looks so healthy and happy," Kevin nodded. "Must be rewarding work." "It is," Charlotte agreed. "Long hours sometimes, but I love it. What about you?" Kevin seemed to consider his answer for a moment. "Real estate development," he finally said. "Mostly commercial properties." "Sounds impressive," Charlotte remarked, though she noticed how he downplayed it. They chatted easily for nearly an hour about dogs, favorite coffee shops in the neighborhood, and the unseasonably warm weather. Nothing profound, but Charlotte found herself enjoying his company. There was something refreshing about his straightforward manner and genuine interest in what she had to say. When Kevin announced he had to leave for another weekend meeting, Charlotte couldn't help but wonder what kind of real estate developer worked so much on weekends. The third Saturday, Kevin brought coffee a latte for her with just the right amount of vanilla, exactly how she'd mentioned she liked it the previous weekend. "You remembered," Charlotte said, touched by the gesture. "I pay attention," Kevin replied with a smile that made her stomach flip unexpectedly. By the fifth weekend, their dog park chats had become something Charlotte looked forward to. Kevin was easy to talk to, and she found herself sharing stories about difficult pet owners at the clinic and her dream of someday opening a wildlife rehabilitation center. Kevin listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and occasionally shared snippets about his own life, his love for sailing, a recent trip to Japan for work, his sister's new baby. But Charlotte noticed he rarely talked specifics about his job or personal life. "You're quite mysterious, Kevin Harrison," she remarked one morning as they watched their dogs play chase with a frisbee. "I feel like I've told you my life story, but I know almost nothing about you." Kevin looked slightly uncomfortable. "Not mysterious, just private. And maybe a bit boring outside of work." I doubt that, Charlotte replied, studying his profile. Today he looked tired with faint shadows under his eyes. Rough week. Just finalizing a deal that's been in the works for months, he said, rubbing his eyes. It finally closed yesterday. Congratulations, Charlotte said. You should be celebrating, not sitting in a dog park with bed head. Kevin's hand immediately went to his hair and Charlotte laughed. I'm kidding. Your hair looks perfect, as always. Was that a blush on his cheeks? Charlotte felt a small thrill at the possibility that she might affect this composed man. Actually, Kevin began, then paused as if reconsidering. You know what, you're right. He turned to face her directly. Charlotte, would you like to have dinner with me tonight to celebrate? The question caught her completely off guard. Their dog park friendship had become a comfortable weekend routine, but she hadn't allowed herself to think beyond that. Sure, she found him attractive and enjoyed their conversations, but dinner felt like crossing a line from casual acquaintances to something more intentional. She stammered, watching uncertainty cloud his expression. It's just dinner, he added quickly. But I understand if you'd rather keep our relationship strictly canine-centric. Charlotte found herself smiling at his formal phrasing. No, dinner would be nice. I'd like that. The relief on his face was evident. Great, how about Giovanni's at 8? Charlotte's eyes widened. Giovanni's was one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, with a months-long waiting list. Giovanni's, Kevin, that's impossible to get into without reservations made way in advance. Kevin just smiled. I know the owner is 8 too late. No, 8 is fine, Charlotte replied, suddenly very aware that there might be more to Kevin Harrison than she'd realized. That evening, Charlotte stood in front of her closet feeling overwhelmed. Her roommate and best friend Tara sat cross-legged on Charlotte's bed, offering increasingly unhelpful commentary. What about the black dress? Tara suggested for the third time. Too funeral, Charlotte muttered, pulling out a burgundy-wrapped dress she'd worn to her cousin's wedding. Maybe this. Perfect, Tara declared. So tell me again about this dog park guy who casually drops that he can get you into Giovanni's on a Saturday night, Charlotte shrugged, slipping the dress over her head. He said he's in real estate development, commercial properties. Uh-huh. And he wears what brand of watch again? I don't know, Charlotte said, though she had noticed the sleek timepiece on more than one occasion. It looks expensive, and drives, a Range Rover, I think. I've seen him getting into one in the parking lot. Tara raised an eyebrow. Charlotte, honey, I think your dog park friend might be loaded. Don't be ridiculous, Charlotte dismissed the idea, though she'd had similar suspicions. Just because someone has a nice watch and car doesn't mean they're wealthy. Sure, and people who aren't wealthy totally know the owner of Giovanni's personally, Tara said dryly. Just Google him. What? No, Charlotte was horrified at the suggestion. That would be creepy and invasive. It's not invasive, it's due diligence, Tara argued, already reaching for her phone. Kevin Harrison Real Estate. Stop it! Charlotte lunged for the phone, but Tara held it away. Oh my God, Tara breathed, her eyes widening as she stared at her screen. What? Charlotte asked, curiosity overcoming her principles. Harrison Developments, Kevin Harrison, CEO and founder. Tara turned the phone to show Charlotte a professional headshot of Kevin looking polished in a tailored suit. The company that just bought that entire downtown block for the new entertainment complex. Charlotte, this guy isn't just wealthy, he's a freaking millionaire. Charlotte sank onto the bed, mind racing. The pieces began to fall into place, the expensive accessories, the constant weekend meetings, the casual mention of international travel for work, and now Giovanni's. Why wouldn't he tell me? She wondered aloud. Maybe because when you're that rich, people treat you differently, Tara suggested. Or maybe he just wanted you to like him for him, not his bank account. Charlotte thought about their conversations at the park, how Kevin always seemed more interested in hearing about her day than talking about himself, how he remembered little details about her life, how genuinely he laughed at her jokes. I need to figure out what to do with this information, Charlotte said, feeling suddenly nervous about the evening ahead. You do nothing, Tara advised firmly. He's still the same guy you've been crushing on for weeks, just with a few more zeros in his bank account. At exactly 7:55, Charlotte's phone buzzed with a text from Kevin saying he was outside. She expected a driver or at least the Range Rover, but instead found Kevin standing beside her building's entrance, hands in the pockets of his charcoal gray suit pants. He'd paired the suit with a light blue shirt that brought out his eyes, no tie, and looked more handsome than any man had a right to. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy despite weeks of easy conversation. "Hi," he replied, his eyes taking in her burgundy dress with clear appreciation. "You look beautiful, Charlotte." "Thanks," she managed, feeling the heat rise to her cheeks. "You clean up pretty well yourself." "My car's just around the corner," he said, gesturing down the street. To her surprise, it wasn't the Range Rover but a more modest Audi sedan. The drive to Giovanni's was quiet, with Charlotte wrestling with her new knowledge about Kevin and unsure how to act. Should she confront him about his omission? Pretend she didn't know? The uncertainty made her uncharacteristically silent. Kevin glanced over at her as they stopped at a light. "Everything okay? You seem quiet." Charlotte took a deep breath. "I have a confession to make. My roommate Googled you after I mentioned dinner at Giovanni's." Kevin's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly, but his expression remained neutral. "And what did the great Google tell you?" "That you're not just in real estate, you're Harrison Developments, the Harrison Developments." She turned in her seat to face him. "Why didn't you tell me?" The light turned green, and Kevin drove for a few moments before answering. "Would it have mattered?" "Of course not," Charlotte replied automatically. "Really?" Kevin's skepticism was evident. "Because in my experience, once people know, everything changes. Suddenly I'm not just Kevin, I'm Kevin Harrison, CEO with a net worth that people can look up online." They pulled into the restaurant's valet lane before Charlotte could respond. Kevin handed his keys to the attendant and came around to open her door. "For what it's worth," he said quietly as he helped her out, "I was planning to tell you tonight. I just wanted a chance to know you first without all that getting in the way." His sincerity was evident, and Charlotte felt her irritation fading. "I understand," she said, "but no more secrets, okay?" Kevin nodded, offering his arm. "Deal." Inside Giovanni's, it became immediately apparent that Kevin wasn't just a regular customer. The maitre d' greeted him warmly, addressing him by name, and led them to a secluded table in a small alcove with a perfect view of both the restaurant and the city lights outside. "Mr. Harrison, always a pleasure," the maitre d' said. "Giovanni will be out shortly to welcome you personally." After they were seated and left with menus, Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "So you really do know the owner?" "Giovanni was my first commercial tenant when I was just starting out," Kevin explained. "He took a chance on me when no one else would. When he wanted to expand to this location 5 years ago, I helped finance it." "That's actually really cool," Charlotte admitted. As promised, Giovanni himself appeared moments later, a boisterous Italian man who embraced Kevin like a son and charmed Charlotte with compliments about her beauty and Kevin's good taste. He insisted they leave the menu selection to him and disappeared back to the kitchen with dramatic flourishes. "He's exactly what I'd expect an Italian restaurateur to be," Charlotte laughed after he left. "Giovanni never disappoints," Kevin agreed, visibly relaxing. "So now that my secret's out, any other questions?" Charlotte took a sip of the wine that had appeared as if by magic. "How did you start your company?" What followed was the most open conversation they'd had since meeting. Kevin told her about founding Harrison Developments at 25 with a small inheritance from his grandfather and a lot of ambitious ideas. He described the risks he'd taken, the failures he'd endured, and the breakthrough project that had established his reputation 7 years ago. "I'm 34 now, and sometimes I still feel like I'm making it up as I go," he admitted. "That's oddly reassuring," Charlotte said. "I'm 30 and definitely still making it up as I go." The dinner was exquisite course after course of Giovanni's specialties, each more delicious than the last. Charlotte found herself relaxing into the evening, the initial awkwardness of her discovery fading as Kevin became just Kevin again, the same thoughtful, intelligent man she'd come to know at the dog park, but now with the freedom to share more of himself. He told her about growing up as the middle child between 2 sisters, about his love for architecture that had drawn him to development, and about his passion for creating spaces that would bring communities together. In turn, Charlotte shared more about her own background, her parents' divorce when she was 12, her college years working multiple jobs to afford veterinary technician training, and her current work helping a senior veterinarian who was gradually transitioning his practice to her. "That's amazing," Kevin said when she explained the arrangement. "So you'll own the practice eventually?" "That's the plan," Charlotte confirmed. "Dr. Winters is 70 and wants to retire in about 5 years. I'll take over completely then, but we're phasing in the transition gradually." "You never mentioned you were an entrepreneur yourself," Kevin said, looking impressed. Charlotte laughed. "I don't think of it that way. I just love animals and want to help them." "That's the best reason to build something," Kevin said quietly. By the time they finished dessert, a tiramisu that Charlotte declared was better than any other dessert I've ever tasted. It was nearly midnight, and they had gone through topics ranging from favorite books to political views to dream vacation destinations. "I should get you home," Kevin said reluctantly, signaling for the check that never arrived. "You're not paying?" Charlotte asked, reaching for her purse. Kevin shook his head with a smile. "Giovanni never lets me pay. I've tried. Instead, I make anonymous donations to the culinary school scholarship he runs for underprivileged kids. It's our arrangement." Outside, waiting for the valet to bring Kevin's car, Charlotte shivered slightly in the cool night air. Without hesitation, Kevin slipped off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Thank you," she said, wrapping it tighter around herself and inhaling the subtle scent of his cologne. "For dinner and for being honest." Kevin stepped closer, his eyes holding hers. "I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry I didn't." "I understand why you didn't," Charlotte replied softly. For a moment, Charlotte thought he might kiss her, and she realized with sudden clarity how much she wanted him to. But the valet arrived with the car, breaking the moment. The drive back to her apartment was comfortable, filled with easy conversation about the food they'd eaten and Giovanni's larger-than-life personality. When Kevin pulled up in front of her building, he put the car in park and turned to face her. "I had a really good time tonight, Charlotte." "So did I," she replied, suddenly reluctant to say goodnight. "Would you like to do this again?" Kevin asked, an unexpected note of uncertainty in his voice. "Not at Giovanni's, somewhere more casual maybe. There's this great little Thai place I know." Charlotte smiled, charmed by his nervousness. "I'd love to, but next time let's bring the dogs. Baxter will be jealous I had such a good time without him." Kevin's face lit up. "It's a date. How about Tuesday? I can pick you up after work." "Tuesday is perfect," Charlotte confirmed, then on impulse leaned across the console and placed a quick kiss on his cheek. "Good night, Kevin." Before he could respond, she slipped out of the car and hurried toward her building entrance, heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and something that felt a lot like the beginning of falling in love. Tuesday's dinner at the tiny Thai restaurant was even better than their first date. Without the weight of Kevin's secret between them, conversation flowed easily, and the casual atmosphere allowed them both to relax completely. They ordered too many dishes and laughed as they tried to make room on the small table for all the plates. After dinner, they took Baxter and Rex for a walk along the river, shoulders bumping occasionally as they strolled side by side. When Kevin's hand found hers, Charlotte interlaced their fingers without hesitation, feeling a simple happiness she hadn't experienced in years. Their first kiss happened under a streetlight as the dogs played at their feet, tentative at first, then deepening as Kevin pulled her closer, one hand cupping her face with surprising tenderness. "I've been wanting to do that since our third Saturday at the dog park," he confessed when they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless. "What took you so long?" Charlotte teased, stretching up for another brief kiss. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both exciting and comfortable. Weekend mornings still began at the dog park, but now they arrived together, fingers interlaced as they walked the path. Tuesday became their standing date night, trying new restaurants across the city. Kevin introduced Charlotte to his passion for sailing, taking her out on his boat on a perfect Sunday afternoon. Charlotte showed Kevin her favorite hiking trail outside the city, where they spent hours talking about everything and nothing. Kevin's wealth remained a backdrop to their relationship rather than its focus. He lived well but not extravagantly, explaining to Charlotte that growing up with financially struggling parents had made him cautious with money despite his success. They divorced partly because of financial stress, he told her one evening as they sat on his balcony watching the sunset. I never want money to be something that causes pain in my relationships. Charlotte appreciated his perspective, and the fact that while he could clearly afford luxury, he seemed to value experiences over possessions. The one exception was his downtown penthouse, which Charlotte had to admit was spectacular, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows with breathtaking city views. This is definitely not a starter apartment, she joked the first time he brought her there. It's an investment, he'd replied with a shrug, and Rex likes the rooftop dog park. 6 months into their relationship, Kevin invited Charlotte to accompany him to the grand opening of his newest project, a mixed-use development featuring affordable housing units above street-level retail spaces designed to support local small businesses. This is the project I was finalizing the day I asked you to dinner, Kevin explained as he guided her through the building during the pre-opening tour. It's what I'm most proud of professionally. Charlotte squeezed his hand, understanding now why this particular development meant so much to him. The carefully designed spaces reflected Kevin's belief that communities thrived when people had both affordable homes and local businesses that served their needs. It's amazing, Charlotte said sincerely. You should be proud. Later that evening, as they mingled with city officials, investors, and community leaders at the opening reception, Charlotte watched Kevin in his element, confident but humble, passionate about the project's potential impact, genuinely interested in everyone he spoke with regardless of their status. Your boyfriend is quite impressive, commented an older woman who introduced herself as the city's deputy mayor. This development will transform this neighborhood. He is impressive, Charlotte agreed, finding Kevin across the room deep in conversation with a local business owner who would be occupying one of the retail spaces. The pride she felt watching him took her by surprise with its intensity. That night, as they lay tangled together in Kevin's bed, Charlotte propped herself up on one elbow to look at him in the dim light filtering through the windows. What? He asked, reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face. I love you, she said simply, the words feeling right in a way she hadn't expected. I just wanted you to know that. Kevin's smile was slow and beautiful as he pulled her down for a kiss. I love you too, Charlotte, more than I thought possible. Summer transitioned to fall, and their relationship deepened. They settled into comfortable routines, Kevin working long hours during the week, but always making time for their Tuesday dates. Charlotte occasionally bringing injured wildlife to Kevin's spacious balcony for rehabilitation when her clinic didn't have room. I never thought I'd have a hawk recuperating in my penthouse, Kevin remarked one morning as he watched Charlotte carefully feeding the injured bird of prey. But I love that you trust me to help. In November, Kevin surprised Charlotte with a weekend trip to a mountain cabin to celebrate their 8-month anniversary. 8 months isn't traditionally an anniversary people celebrate, Charlotte pointed out as they drove through the increasingly rural landscape. I'm not traditional, Kevin replied with a grin. And I think every month with you is worth celebrating. The cabin turned out to be a stunning modern retreat nestled among pine trees, with panoramic mountain views and a hot tub on the deck. They spent the weekend hiking with the dogs, cooking elaborate meals in the gourmet kitchen, and enjoying uninterrupted time together away from work and city life. On their final evening, as they sat in the hot tub watching the stars appear one by one in the clear mountain sky, Kevin grew uncharacteristically quiet. Everything okay? Charlotte asked, nudging him gently with her foot under the bubbling water. I've been thinking, Kevin began, then paused as if gathering his thoughts. When I met you at the dog park that first day, I was in a place where work was everything. I was successful by most measures, but something was missing. Charlotte watched his face in the soft lighting, sensing this was important. Then Baxter stole Rex's ball, Kevin continued with a small smile, and suddenly my weekends had something I looked forward to more than work. You changed everything for me, Charlotte. You changed things for me too, she replied softly. Kevin reached for something behind him and turned back with a small box in his hand. Charlotte's heart began to race as she recognized the velvet jewelry box. I know it hasn't been that long, Kevin said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald-cut diamond ring. Charlotte Anderson, will you marry me? Tears sprang to Charlotte's eyes as happiness overwhelmed her. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, absolutely yes. Kevin slipped the ring onto her finger with slightly shaking hands, then pulled her into a kiss that conveyed all the love, passion, and promise of their future together. A year later, they married in an intimate ceremony in the courtyard garden of Kevin's most recent development, a community center in a previously underserved neighborhood. Baxter and Rex, wearing matching bow ties, served as ring bearers. Charlotte's clinic staff and Kevin's development team mingled with family and friends in a celebration that perfectly reflected their values of community and connection. For their honeymoon, they spent 2 weeks sailing around the Greek islands, falling even more deeply in love with each sunset they shared. Upon their return, they moved into a new home, not Kevin's penthouse or Charlotte's apartment, but a house they chose together in a neighborhood with tree-lined streets and a large fenced yard for the dogs. The home was spacious but warm, with a dedicated room for Charlotte's wildlife rehabilitation work and a home office for Kevin that allowed him to work remotely more often. 2 years after their wedding, Charlotte successfully completed the purchase of Dr. Winter's veterinary practice, expanding it to include the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center she had always dreamed of opening. Kevin's company provided pro bono development services for the new facility, which quickly became a respected resource for injured wildlife throughout the region. On their 3rd anniversary, they welcomed their daughter, Lily, who inherited Charlotte's auburn hair and Kevin's blue eyes. Baxter and Rex appointed themselves her dedicated guardians, never straying far from her side. One sunny Saturday morning, when Lily was almost a year old, the family made their weekly visit to the dog park where it all began. As Lily practiced her wobbly walking between her parents' supportive hands, with the dogs racing circles around them, Charlotte caught Kevin watching her with a look of pure contentment. "What?" she asked, echoing the question from years before. "Just thinking about how differently my life might have turned out if Baxter hadn't stolen that tennis ball," Kevin replied, leaning down to kiss her lightly. "Best theft ever," Charlotte agreed, looking around at the simple perfection of their family, a millionaire developer, a veterinarian, a toddler, and 2 dogs enjoying a Saturday morning together. As if understanding he was being discussed, Baxter trotted over with a tennis ball, dropping it at Kevin's feet with a hopeful look. "Some things never change," Kevin laughed, picking up the ball and throwing it across the park for both dogs to chase. Charlotte wrapped her arm around her husband's waist and rested her head against his shoulder, watching their daughter clap with delight at the dog's antics. The journey from that first chance meeting to this moment hadn't been without challenges, but standing here now, Charlotte knew with absolute certainty that every step had led exactly where they were meant to be together, building a life filled with purpose, passion, and love.